Your best day, not your worst day, just a regular one. You wake up, you make choices, you delay some things, you push through others, you talk to yourself in ways no one else hears. Those small moments decide far more than big dreams ever do. Yet most people keep waiting for motivation, confidence, or the right mood to show up and save them. Here's the hard truth. If you don't lead yourself, your habits will, your emotions will, your comfort will, and they don't care where your life ends up. This audiobook is not here to impress you, it's here to wake you up, to show you how real progress actually works in everyday life. Not overnight success, not loud hype, just steady self-leadership that compounds quietly. If you've ever felt stuck even though you know what to do, this is for you. If you're tired of starting strong and fading out, this is for you. Learn how to lead yourself first, and you won't have to chase success anymore. It will start showing up because your daily actions invite it. Chapter 1. Claim control of your inner world before outer win. Success will follow you when you lead yourself first, because life always responds to the person you become before it responds to what you want. I have watched this truth play out in real lives for decades. People chase money, titles, approval, and comfort, while avoiding the one place where real power lives, which is inside their own thinking habits and daily choices. If the inner world stays confused, angry, distracted, or careless, the outer world eventually reflects that state, no matter how smart, talented, or lucky someone appears at the beginning. Most people spend their days reacting. They wake up already tired. Their phone tells them what matters. Their mood decides their effort. Their past decides their confidence. That is not leadership. That is surrender. The moment a person gives their inner world away, they become available to frustration, stress, and disappointment. They begin blaming schedules, bosses, parents, partners, systems, or bad timing. Blame feels relieving for a moment, but it quietly steals control, and when control is gone, success becomes random instead of predictable. Claiming control of the inner world means deciding who is in charge of thoughts, emotions, and responses. It does not mean pretending life is easy. It means choosing not to be ruled by every feeling that passes through the mind. Feelings are powerful, but they are not wise leaders. Some mornings motivation is low, energy feels heavy, and doubt speaks loudly. Those moments are not signs to stop, they are invitations to lead. The inner world is built from small decisions repeated often. What you tell yourself when things go wrong. What you focus on when nobody is watching. How you respond when plans fall apart. Whether you speak to yourself with honesty or cruelty. These things shape behavior. Behavior shapes results. Results shape confidence. Confidence then shapes the future. That entire chain starts inside. People often say they want confidence. Confidence does not arrive first. It is earned through self-leadership. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when it feels uncomfortable, trust grows inside. That trust changes posture, voice, tone, and presence. Others feel it. Opportunities respond to it. Life opens doors for people who can be trusted with responsibility, starting with responsibility for themselves. Inner control also means learning to pause. Most mistakes are made in emotional moments. Anger leads to tattoos that cannot be taken back. Fear leads to hesitation that costs years. Comfort leads to delay that turns into regret. A person who leads their inner world learns to pause before reacting. That pause creates space for better choices. Better choices compound over time. The inner world is also where standards live. Not goals, standards. Goals are useful, but standards decide behavior. A standard is how someone decides to live daily regardless of mood. A standard says, this is how I speak, this is how I work, this is how I treat people. This is how I use time. Standards create consistency. Consistency creates progress. Progress builds belief. Many people want outer wins without inner discipline. They want respect without self-respect. They want freedom without structure. They want success without responsibility. Life does not work that way. The outer world follows the inner one because the inner one decides effort, patience, learning and persistence. When someone claims control of their inner world, they stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is built through action, not feelings. Waiting for the perfect mood keeps people stuck for years. Acting despite discomfort builds momentum. Momentum quiets fear. Fear fades when progress appears. Inner leadership also means choosing what deserves attention. Attention is energy. Whatever receives attention grows stronger. Constant focus on problems multiplies stress. Constant focus on growth multiplies capability. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means choosing productive focus. Ask better questions. What can be learned here? What can be improved today? What can be done with what is available now? The inner world is shaped by input. What is watched, listened to, repeated and rehearsed mentally. Garbage input weakens judgment. Quality input sharpens thinking. Reading, listening, reflecting, and learning daily keeps the mind strong. A strong mind handles pressure better. Pressure reveals character. Character determines long-term success. Self-talk matters more than people realize. The tone used internally becomes the tone used with the world. Constant criticism drains energy. Honest encouragement builds strength. This is not about false positivity. It is about constructive truth. Admit mistakes without attacking identity. Correct behavior without destroying confidence. People who master their inner world learn to delay comfort. Comfort is not bad, but chasing it too early ruins progress. Short-term comfort often trades places with long-term pain. Leading yourself means choosing effort before ease and discipline before regret. This choice repeated daily changes destiny. Inner control also means managing expectations. Unrealistic expectations create constant disappointment. Realistic expectations paired with high standards create steady progress. Life includes delay, effort, failure, and learning. Accepting that reduces frustration and increases patience. Patience keeps people in the game long enough to win. The world rewards people who can stay calm under pressure. Calm is not weakness. Calm is strength under control. Calm allows thinking. Thinking leads to strategy. Strategy produces results. Results build credibility. Credibility attracts opportunity. Leading yourself first means deciding that excuses are no longer useful. Excuses protect the ego, but sabotage growth. Every excuse carries a hidden cost. It delays improvement and weakens self-belief. Ownership does the opposite. Ownership is heavy at first, but empowering over time. When everything becomes your responsibility, everything becomes changeable. The inner world is also where identity forms. Identity answers the question, who am I becoming? Behavior follows identity. If someone sees themselves as disciplined, they act disciplined. If they see themselves as inconsistent, they repeat inconsistency. Identity is shaped by repeated actions, not wishes. Change actions. Change identity. Fear lives in the inner world. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of success. Fear of responsibility. Fear does not disappear by waiting. It fades through exposure and action. Each small courageous step weakens fear. Avoidance strengthens it. Leading yourself means acting even while fear is present. When inner leadership is strong, outside opinions lose power. Criticism becomes information, not a verdict. Praise becomes appreciation, not identity. Stability grows. Stability creates focus. Focus produces excellence. Time is another inner decision. Everyone has the same hours. How time is valued determines results. Scrolling, reacting, and drifting feel harmless, but steal years quietly. Leading yourself means choosing intentional use of time. Time invested in growth pays interest. Time wasted charges regret. Emotional control is not suppression, it is direction. Emotions carry messages, but should not drive behavior blindly. Feel anger without becoming destructive. Feel sadness without quitting. Feel excitement without becoming careless. This balance is learned through awareness and practice. The inner world is private, but its results are public. People see consistency, confidence, calm, and clarity, without knowing the internal work behind it. They call it luck or talent. In reality, it is self-leadership practiced daily. Success following self-leadership is not magic. It is cause and effect. Improved thinking improves choices. Improved choices improve habits. Improved habits improve outcomes. This process works for anyone willing to lead themselves first. Waiting for external change before internal change keeps people stuck. When the inner world shifts, the outer world eventually catches up. Better conversations happen. Better decisions are made. Better opportunities appear. Not because the world changed, but because perception, behavior, and readiness changed. Claiming control of the inner world is a daily decision, not a one-time event. Some days will be harder. Old habits will pull back. Discomfort will appear. That is normal. Leadership shows up most clearly on difficult days. Easy days require little leadership. Hard days reveal it. Growth often feels lonely at first. When excuses are dropped and standards rise, some people will not understand. Approval is not required for progress. Respect follows results. Results follow discipline. The inner world also needs rest, reflection, and renewal. Constant pressure without renewal leads to burnout. Leading yourself includes caring for energy, health, and clarity. Rest is not quitting. Rest is preparation. Gratitude strengthens the inner world. It shifts focus from lack to resource. Gratitude does not remove ambition, it fuels it. Appreciating progress builds momentum. Progress motivates further effort. People underestimate how powerful inner leadership becomes over time. Small improvements daily feel insignificant at first. Weeks later, patterns change. Months later, confidence grows. Years later, life looks different. This is the quiet power of consistency. The greatest gift you can give yourself is becoming someone you can rely on. When you trust yourself, stress decreases. Decisions become easier. Direction becomes clearer. Life becomes more cooperative. The world is full of people trying to control outcomes without controlling themselves. That approach creates frustration. Control the inner world first, and the outer world becomes manageable. Success is attracted to clarity, discipline, responsibility, and consistency. These qualities live inside before they appear outside. Lead yourself first, and success will have no choice but to follow.
Chapter 2. Train yourself to act even when moods resist. Action does not wait for permission from your mood. It rarely arrives when you feel inspired, confident, or ready. Most of the meaningful progress in life is built during moments when motivation is absent and resistance is loud. The idea that you must first feel good in order to act is one of the most expensive myths people carry. Moods are unstable, reactive, and often shaped by things you cannot control. If action depends on them, your life becomes unpredictable and fragile. Training yourself to act despite emotional resistance is not about suppressing feelings or pretending they do not exist. It is about refusing to let temporary inner weather dictate long-term direction. Moods rise and fall for countless reasons. Lack of sleep, stress, fear of judgment, boredom, uncertainty, or past disappointment. If you wait for emotional alignment, you quietly hand over authority to these fluctuations. The discipline of action begins when you accept a simple truth. Feelings are information, not commands. They can be listened to, acknowledged, and still overridden. This shift alone changes how you relate to effort. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" you ask, "Is this the kind of action that moves my life forward?" That question anchors behavior to values rather than comfort. At first, acting while resistant feels unnatural. Your body may slow down, your mind may argue, and excuses may sound logical. This is normal. Resistance is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are stretching beyond habit. Habits are efficient because they conserve energy, but they also trap you in familiar patterns. When you choose action without emotional approval, you interrupt those patterns. Over time, this interruption becomes a skill. You stop seeing resistance as a barrier and start recognizing it as a predictable phase that passes once movement begins. One of the most practical ways to train this skill is to shrink the definition of action. Resistance often grows when tasks feel large, undefined, or overwhelming. The mind reacts with avoidance to protect itself. Instead of negotiating with your emotions, reduce the task until it becomes almost unreasonable to refuse. Open the book instead of reading a chapter. Put on the shoes instead of planning the workout. Write one sentence instead of finishing the page. These small actions bypass emotional debate and create momentum. Once movement starts, the emotional tone often changes on its own. Not because you forced it, but because the nervous system responds to progress. Consistency matters more than intensity in this process. Acting occasionally while inspired does little to build reliability. Acting regularly while unmotivated rewires your identity. Each time you follow through despite resistance, you send yourself a quiet message. My behavior is not controlled by my mood. That message compounds. Confidence grows not from positive thinking, but from repeated proof that you can be trusted to act. Over weeks and months, this trust becomes self-respect, and self-respect becomes fuel that no mood can easily extinguish. There will be days when resistance feels heavy and personal, as if something inside you is actively working against you. On those days, it helps to externalize the feeling. Instead of saying, "I am unmotivated," say, "I am experiencing resistance." That small linguistic shift creates distance. You are no longer the resistance, you are the person noticing it. From that position, action becomes a choice again. You can acknowledge discomfort without surrendering to it. This approach reduces internal conflict because you are not fighting yourself, only moving alongside a temporary state. Another important aspect of acting, despite mood, is abandoning the fantasy of perfect conditions. Waiting for the right time, the right energy, or the right confidence delays action indefinitely. Real progress happens in imperfect circumstances. Learning to work when tired, uncertain, or emotionally flat builds resilience. You stop needing ideal conditions to function. This does not mean ignoring rest or pushing through burnout. It means distinguishing between genuine exhaustion and emotional reluctance. The former requires care, the latter requires movement. Rewarding action rather than outcome strengthens this habit. If you only feel satisfied when results appear, resistance gains power because results are slow. Instead, recognize effort as success. Showing up, starting, and following through are wins regardless of immediate payoff. This reframes discipline as something you do for yourself, not something you endure. Over time, the brain associates action with satisfaction rather than struggle. The work does not become effortless, but it becomes less emotionally charged. There will be moments when you fail to act. This is unavoidable and not a reason to quit. The mistake is turning a missed action into a story about who you are. Training yourself to act despite mood includes training yourself to recover quickly. Notice the miss, drop the judgment, and return to the next small action. Recovery speed matters more than perfection. Each reset reinforces the identity of someone who continues despite setbacks. Acting without waiting for motivation also clarifies what actually matters to you. When comfort is no longer the deciding factor, priorities become clearer. You learn which actions you are willing to do even when they are uncomfortable. Those actions reveal values more honestly than feelings ever could. Over time, your life aligns less with what feels easy and more with what feels meaningful. This alignment creates a deeper, steadier form of fulfillment that does not depend on constant emotional highs. Eventually, something unexpected happens. Moods begin to follow action instead of leading it. Motivation shows up after you start, not before. Confidence grows from evidence, not intention. Emotional resistance still appears, but it loses its authority. You no longer need to eliminate it to move forward. You simply carry it with you, like background noise, while you do what needs to be done. Training yourself to act when moods resist is not about becoming rigid or emotionless. It is about becoming reliable. It is about choosing direction over drift and values over volatility. Every small act taken in the presence of resistance strengthens this muscle. Over time, that strength becomes quiet, steady, and deeply freeing. You stop waiting for yourself to feel different and start building a life that does not depend on how you feel today. Chapter 3. Build self-trust by keeping promises to yourself. Self-trust is not something you discover. It is something you construct. It is built quietly, increment by increment, through the way you treat your own word. Every promise you make to yourself carries weight, whether you acknowledge it or not. When you keep that promise, you reinforce a sense of internal reliability. When you break it, you weaken the bond between intention and action. Over time, this relationship determines how much confidence you have in yourself, not as an abstract feeling, but as a lived certainty that you will follow through when it matters. Many people search for confidence by changing how they think or feel, yet overlook the most direct path to it. Confidence grows from evidence. The strongest evidence you can give yourself is consistency between what you say you will do and what you actually do. When those two align repeatedly, self-trust forms naturally. You stop second-guessing yourself. Decisions feel lighter because you know you are capable of honoring them. This is not about perfection or grand gestures. It is about alignment, practiced daily in small, often unglamorous ways. Promises to yourself are different from promises to others. When you break a promise to someone else, there are social consequences. When you break a promise to yourself, the consequences are internal and often delayed. That delay makes them easy to ignore, but the cost accumulates. Each broken promise subtly teaches you that your own intentions are optional. Over time, this erodes self-respect. You may still function, achieve, and appear disciplined to others, but internally there is hesitation, doubt, and a quiet lack of trust in your own follow-through. Building self-trust begins with becoming more intentional about what you promise yourself. Over-promising is one of the fastest ways to sabotage this process. When goals are unrealistic or vague, failure becomes likely, and trust weakens again. The solution is not to aim lower out of fear, but to aim precisely. Make promises that are specific, manageable, and within your control. Promise effort, not outcomes. Promise actions, not transformation. This shifts the focus from future results to present behavior, which is where trust is actually built. Keeping small promises may seem insignificant, but they are the foundation. Waking up when you said you would, finishing a short task you committed to, or stopping when you planned to stop all count. These moments train your nervous system to associate intention with completion. Over time, this training creates internal stability. You stop needing external pressure or emotional surges to act. You act because you said you would, and that becomes reason enough. There will be moments when breaking a promise feels justified. Fatigue, inconvenience, or distraction can all make backing out seem reasonable. The critical difference lies in awareness. If you consciously renegotiate a promise with yourself, adjusting it honestly and intentionally, trust can remain intact. If you quietly abandon it without acknowledgement, trust takes a hit. Self-trust depends on transparency with yourself. Treat your inner commitments with the same respect you would give to an agreement with someone you value. Another essential element of self-trust is learning to recover when you fall short. No one keeps every promise perfectly. What matters is how you respond afterward. Beating yourself up compounds the damage and creates avoidance. Ignoring it does the same. Repair builds trust faster than denial. Acknowledge the miss, understand why it happened, and recommit to a next small action. This process teaches you that mistakes do not end reliability, they are part of maintaining it. As self-trust grows, decision-making changes. You spend less time debating internally because you know you will act on your choices. This reduces mental fatigue and emotional friction. Life becomes less about forcing yourself forward and more about directing energy where it belongs. You begin to rely on yourself as a stable resource. This reliance is deeply empowering because it is independent of approval, circumstances, or motivation. Keeping promises to yourself also sharpens your sense of identity. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through. This identity is not created by affirmations, but by repetition. Each kept promise reinforces the story you tell yourself about who you are. Over time, this story becomes harder to shake. Challenges still appear, but they are met with a quiet confidence rooted in experience rather than hope. There is also an emotional payoff to self-trust that often goes unnoticed. Anxiety decreases when you trust yourself. Procrastination loses power because avoidance thrives on doubt. Even self-criticism softens because you are no longer constantly disappointed in yourself. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means your internal environment becomes more supportive instead of adversarial. As you practice keeping promises, you may notice a shift in how you relate to others as well. Boundaries become clearer because you know your limits. Commitments become more deliberate because you respect your capacity. You stop saying yes impulsively and start saying yes with intention. This integrity strengthens relationships, but more importantly, it preserves your relationship with yourself. Ultimately, self-trust is the quiet backbone of a disciplined life. It does not announce itself or seek recognition. It shows up as steadiness, follow-through, and resilience. By keeping promises to yourself, especially when no one is watching, you build something that cannot be taken away by failure, criticism, or uncertainty. You build a relationship with yourself that is based on reliability rather than hope. And from that foundation, growth becomes not only possible, but sustainable. Chapter 4. Choose effort daily instead of waiting for motivation. Effort is a decision you make in the present, while motivation is a feeling that appears and disappears without warning. When you build your life around motivation, you give control to something unstable. When you build it around effort, you take that control back. Choosing effort daily is not glamorous, and it is rarely exciting, but it is dependable. It is the quiet force that keeps you moving forward on ordinary days, difficult days, and especially on days when nothing inside you feels supportive. Many people wait for motivation because it feels natural. Motivation feels like energy, clarity, and desire all at once. It feels good to act when motivation is high, and miserable to act when it is absent. But this comfort comes with a cost. Motivation is reactive. It depends on mood, circumstances, recent success, praise, or novelty. When those fade, motivation fades with them. Effort, on the other hand, is proactive. It does not ask how you feel before it moves. It asks what needs to be done and responds with action. Choosing effort daily begins with accepting that most progress happens in emotionally neutral or uncomfortable states. Growth is not a constant upward rush. It is repetitive, sometimes boring, sometimes frustrating, and often invisible in the moment. Waiting to feel inspired before acting means you only work when conditions are ideal. Ideal conditions are rare. Effort fills the gap between where you are and where you want to go, when inspiration is nowhere to be found. Effort also simplifies your inner life. When you rely on motivation, every action requires negotiation. You debate, delay, and overthink. When effort becomes the rule, the debate ends quickly. You already know the answer. You act because effort is what you do today, not because you feel a certain way. This reduces mental noise. Less time is spent arguing with yourself, and more time is spent doing the thing itself. Daily effort does not mean extreme intensity or constant pushing. It means showing up in a consistent way. Some days effort will be strong and visible. Other days it will be quiet and minimal. Both count. Effort adapts to your capacity, while motivation often demands that you feel a certain way first. This flexibility makes effort sustainable. You stop swinging between bursts of productivity and long periods of stagnation. Instead, you build a steady rhythm. There is also an honesty in choosing effort that motivation often lacks. Motivation can create fantasies about who you will be when conditions are perfect. Effort deals with who you are right now. It works with your current energy, current skills, and current limitations. This realism builds resilience. You learn how to function in real life, not in imagined future states where everything feels easier. Over time, effort changes how you experience discomfort. Instead of seeing discomfort as a signal to stop, you begin to see it as part of the process. Effort teaches you that discomfort does not automatically mean danger or failure. It often means you are engaged, learning, or stretching beyond familiarity. This shift reduces avoidance. You stop trying to eliminate discomfort and start moving through it. Another powerful effect of choosing effort daily is identity reinforcement. Each day you act without waiting to feel motivated. You reinforce the identity of someone who shows up regardless of mood. This identity becomes stronger than fleeting emotion. You no longer need to convince yourself that you are disciplined or capable. Your behavior provides constant evidence. This evidence compounds quietly until effort feels less like a struggle and more like a default response. Effort also protects you from the emotional roller coaster of motivation. Motivation creates highs and lows. When it is present, you feel capable and energized. When it disappears, you may feel stuck, lazy, or disappointed in yourself. Effort flattens this cycle. You no longer interpret low motivation as a personal failure. It becomes irrelevant. The work continues at an appropriate pace, regardless of how inspired you feel. Choosing effort daily requires letting go of the idea that you should always feel good about what you are doing. Some actions are meaningful but not enjoyable. Some days are productive but emotionally dull. Effort allows you to accept this without resistance. You stop demanding constant emotional rewards from your actions. In return, you gain progress, stability, and a deeper sense of self-respect. It is important to understand that effort does not kill motivation. It changes where motivation comes from. Instead of waiting for motivation to start, motivation begins to emerge from progress itself. Small wins, completed tasks, and visible movement generate a quieter, more reliable form of motivation. This motivation is grounded in reality, not anticipation. It is earned rather than hoped for. Daily effort also builds momentum in areas that once felt overwhelming. Large goals shrink when approached consistently. What once felt impossible becomes manageable through repetition. Effort turns complexity into familiarity. Familiarity reduces fear. Fear no longer blocks action, because the action itself has become routine. There will still be days when effort feels heavy. Choosing effort does not mean pretending those days do not exist. It means deciding that heaviness does not get the final vote. On those days, effort might look like doing less, slowing down, or focusing on one essential task instead of many. The key is that effort remains intentional. You do not disappear from your commitments just because the day feels hard. Over time, this practice creates trust in yourself. You know that even on uninspired days, you will do something rather than nothing. This trust reduces anxiety about the future. You stop worrying about whether you will feel like it later, because you know you will act regardless. This confidence is calm, not dramatic. It is rooted in repetition, not excitement. Choosing effort daily is ultimately a choice about direction. Motivation looks backward and sideways, reacting to feelings and circumstances. Effort looks forward. It asks where you are going and takes the next step, even if that step feels small or uncomfortable. This forward motion, sustained over time, creates change that motivation alone never could. In the end, effort is what remains when inspiration fades, when novelty disappears, and when results take longer than expected. It is the steady force that carries you through ordinary days and difficult seasons alike. By choosing effort daily, you free yourself from waiting, wishing, and hoping to feel different. You begin building a life that moves because you decide to move, not because you happen to feel ready.
Chapter 5. Guide your thoughts so emotions stop running decisions. Thoughts are the bridge between what happens to you and what you do next. Emotions arrive quickly, often uninvited, reacting to experiences before you have time to interpret them. Decisions, however, are shaped less by emotions themselves and more by the thoughts you attach to those emotions. When thoughts are left unguided, emotions take the lead and behavior follows automatically. Learning to guide your thoughts is not about eliminating emotion, it is about reclaiming authorship over your choices. Emotions are powerful because they feel urgent. Fear demands avoidance, frustration demands escape, excitement demands immediate action. When these signals are obeyed without reflection, decisions become reactive. You may later wonder why you acted impulsively, procrastinated, or abandoned something important. The reason is simple: the emotional signal went unchecked by deliberate thinking. Guiding your thoughts slows this process, just enough to create space. In that space, choice becomes possible. Many people believe their thoughts are objective reflections of reality. In truth, thoughts are interpretations shaped by past experiences, assumptions, and expectations. An emotion appears, a thought explains it, and that explanation feels true even when it is incomplete or distorted. If you do not question the thought, the emotion gains authority. Guiding your thoughts means recognizing that the first explanation is not always the most accurate or useful one. This skill begins with awareness. You cannot guide what you do not notice. Pay attention to narratives that appear when emotions rise. Notice the language your mind uses. Is it absolute, dramatic, or predictive? Thoughts like "this always happens," "I can't handle this," or "there's no point," often accompany strong emotions. These thoughts are not facts, they are signals that your mind is trying to protect you by simplifying reality. Protection, however, is not the same as accuracy. Once a thought is noticed, the next step is evaluation. Ask whether the thought helps or harms your ability to act wisely. A thought does not need to be positive to be useful, but it must be functional. If it narrows your options, amplifies fear, or excuses avoidance, it is worth challenging. This does not mean arguing aggressively with yourself, it means gently testing the thought's reliability. Ask what evidence supports it, and what evidence contradicts it. Often you will find that the thought is exaggerated or incomplete.
Replacing a thought does not require optimism, it requires realism. A guided thought acknowledges difficulty without surrendering agency. Instead of "I can't do this," a more grounded thought might be "This is uncomfortable, but I can take one step." Instead of "This feeling will last forever," you might think "This feeling is intense right now, but it will change." These shifts reduce emotional intensity and restore a sense of control. Guiding thoughts also involves choosing what you focus on. Attention fuels emotion. When you repeatedly replay a negative scenario or dwell on uncertainty, emotions intensify. Shifting focus does not mean denial, it means directing mental energy toward what you can influence. Ask yourself, what action is available in the present moment? Action-oriented thinking anchors you in reality and prevents emotional spirals from dominating decision-making. Another important aspect of guiding thoughts is understanding that emotions are not instructions, they are feedback. Anxiety might indicate perceived risk, but it does not dictate that you must avoid. Sadness may signal loss, but it does not demand withdrawal from life. Anger may point to a boundary, but it does not require impulsive reaction. Thoughts interpret these signals. By guiding interpretation, you guide response. Over time, unguided thinking creates patterns. If fear-driven thoughts repeatedly stop you from acting, avoidance becomes habitual. If frustration-driven thoughts lead to quitting, persistence weakens. Guiding thoughts interrupts these loops. Each time you choose a more deliberate interpretation, you weaken the automatic connection between emotion and behavior. This builds emotional maturity, not by suppressing feeling, but by integrating it with reason. Language plays a powerful role in this process. The words you use internally shape emotional intensity. Absolute language intensifies emotion, while flexible language softens it. Saying "I must" creates pressure. Saying "I choose" restores autonomy. Saying "This is unbearable" amplifies distress. Saying "This is difficult" keeps it manageable. Small changes in phrasing alter how emotions influence decisions. Guiding thoughts also requires patience. You will not gain control over every emotional reaction immediately. Some emotions are deeply ingrained and tied to past experiences. The goal is not instant mastery, but gradual improvement. Each moment of awareness, each pause before reacting, strengthens the skill. Over time, your default response shifts from reaction to reflection. As this skill develops, you may notice a sense of internal steadiness. Emotions still arise, but they no longer hijack behavior as easily. You feel less pushed around by internal states. Decisions feel more intentional because they are informed by values rather than impulses. This steadiness does not mean emotional numbness, it means emotional balance. Guiding your thoughts also reduces regret. Many regrets come not from the emotions you felt, but from the actions you took under their influence. When you act from guided thinking, even difficult decisions feel aligned. You may still feel discomfort, but you are less likely to feel that you betrayed yourself. This alignment builds self-respect and confidence. There is also freedom in realizing that you are not required to believe every thought you have. Thoughts appear automatically, but belief is optional. You can let a thought pass without engaging with it. You can choose not to feed it with attention. This detachment weakens the emotional charge attached to it. Over time, thoughts lose their power to dictate behavior simply by appearing. Guiding thoughts becomes especially important under stress. Stress narrows thinking and amplifies emotion. Under pressure, the mind defaults to familiar patterns. Training yourself to guide thoughts during calmer moments prepares you for these situations. When stress hits, you are more likely to recognize unhelpful narratives and redirect them before they escalate. This practice also improves relationships. When emotions drive decisions in communication, reactions can be impulsive and damaging. Guided thinking introduces pause. You consider what you want to express, rather than what you feel compelled to release. This leads to clearer boundaries, calmer conversations, and fewer misunderstandings. Ultimately, guiding your thoughts is about leadership within yourself. Emotions are powerful advisors, but poor rulers. Thoughts are the tools that allow you to listen, without obeying blindly. When thoughts are guided, emotions inform decisions, rather than control them. You become less reactive and more deliberate. This shift does not happen overnight. It is built through repeated moments of awareness, questioning, and redirection. Each time you choose a thought that supports wise action, you strengthen the habit. Over time, emotions lose their grip on decision-making, not because they disappear, but because they are no longer alone at the wheel. When you guide your thoughts, you reclaim agency. You stop being pulled by every emotional wave and start navigating with intention. Decisions become expressions of who you want to be, not just reflections of how you feel in the moment. That ability is one of the most powerful forms of self-control you can develop, and it shapes not only your actions, but the entire direction of your life.
Chapter 6. Practice discipline gently without punishment or harsh self-talk. Discipline is often misunderstood as force, rigidity, or self-denial. Many people associate it with harsh rules, punishment, or relentless pressure. This misunderstanding causes discipline to feel threatening, something to resist rather than develop. In reality, discipline does not require cruelty toward yourself. It functions best when it is practiced with patience, respect, and steady care. Gentle discipline is not weak discipline. It is disciplined behavior that can last without destroying the person practicing it. Harsh self-talk is one of the most common ways people sabotage discipline. The inner voice that insults, shames, or threatens may seem motivating in the short term, but it erodes consistency over time. When effort is constantly paired with self-criticism, the mind begins to associate discipline with pain. Eventually, avoidance follows. Gentle discipline takes a different approach. It recognizes mistakes without turning them into personal attacks. It corrects behavior without attacking identity. The goal of discipline is not control for its own sake. The goal is reliability. You want to be able to depend on yourself without fear. Fear-based discipline might produce short bursts of compliance, but it creates tension and burnout. Gentle discipline creates trust. When you know that effort will not be followed by internal punishment, you are more willing to try again after setbacks. This willingness is essential for long-term growth. Practicing discipline starts with how you interpret mistakes. Mistakes are information, not evidence of failure. When something does not go as planned, a harsh approach asks, "What is wrong with me?" A gentle approach asks, "What can I adjust?" This shift keeps attention on behavior rather than worth. It also makes improvement more likely because the mind stays open instead of defensive. Language matters deeply in this process. The words you use internally shape how discipline feels. Statements filled with judgment tighten the nervous system. Neutral, supportive language keeps it regulated. Saying "I failed again" creates heaviness. Saying "that didn't work, I'll try a different approach" creates movement. The difference may seem small, but repeated hundreds of times, it determines whether discipline becomes sustainable or exhausting. Gentle discipline also respects human limits. It does not pretend that energy is endless or that progress is linear. Some days effort will be strong, and other days it will be minimal. Gentle discipline allows for variation without abandonment. It does not demand the same output every day. It demands continued engagement over time. This flexibility prevents the all-or-nothing mindset that causes people to quit when they cannot meet unrealistic standards.
Another key aspect of gentle discipline is separating accountability from punishment. Accountability means noticing what happened and taking responsibility for the next step. Punishment adds unnecessary suffering. You can hold yourself accountable without making yourself miserable. You can acknowledge a missed commitment and still speak to yourself with respect. This balance keeps discipline functional rather than emotional. Many people believe that if they are kind to themselves, they will become lazy. This belief is rooted in fear, not evidence. In practice, self-respect increases consistency. When you treat yourself like someone worth supporting, effort feels meaningful instead of forced. Gentle discipline does not remove standards. It removes hostility. Standards remain clear, but the path toward meeting them becomes healthier. Gentle discipline also improves focus. Harsh self-talk consumes mental energy. When the mind is busy defending itself from internal attacks, less energy is available for the task itself. Supportive inner dialogue frees that energy. You spend less time criticizing and more time doing. Over time, this increases efficiency and reduces emotional fatigue. Another important element is patience. Discipline is often imagined as urgency, but patience is its quiet partner. Progress unfolds through repetition, not pressure. Gentle discipline allows time for habits to form. It does not demand immediate transformation. This patience reduces frustration and helps you stay engaged even when results are slow. When discipline is practiced gently, setbacks lose their power to derail you. A harsh approach turns setbacks into proof of inadequacy. A gentle approach treats them as part of the process. This perspective keeps you moving forward instead of restarting emotionally every time something goes wrong. Continuity matters more than intensity. Gentle discipline also supports emotional regulation. When emotions are met with understanding rather than judgment, they pass more quickly. This does not mean indulging every feeling. It means acknowledging emotional states without letting them dictate behavior. You act with firmness, but you speak to yourself with calmness. This combination strengthens self-control rather than weakening it. Over time, gentle discipline reshapes your relationship with effort. Effort stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like participation. You are no longer fighting yourself to move forward. You are guiding yourself. This guidance is firm but not cruel. It recognizes that growth requires effort, but effort does not require self-hate. There is also a deeper psychological safety that develops through this approach. When you know that trying will not lead to internal punishment, you become more willing to attempt challenging things. Fear of failure decreases because failure no longer carries emotional humiliation. This openness accelerates learning and resilience. Gentle discipline is especially important during periods of low energy or stress. These are the moments when harsh self-talk does the most damage. Gentle discipline adapts expectations while preserving direction. You may do less, but you do not disappear. This continuity preserves identity and momentum even during difficult seasons. As this practice continues, you may notice a quieter confidence emerging. It is not loud or aggressive. It comes from knowing that you can guide yourself without violence. You trust that you will correct course when needed. This trust reduces anxiety and over-control. You no longer feel the need to punish yourself into compliance. Gentle discipline also encourages honesty. When punishment is removed, there is less need to hide mistakes from yourself. You can see clearly what is working and what is not. This clarity improves decision-making and planning. Discipline becomes adaptive instead of rigid. Ultimately, practicing discipline gently is an act of respect. It acknowledges that you are both the guide and the learner. You set direction, but you also allow room for growth. This balance creates discipline that lasts because it is rooted in care rather than fear. Discipline does not have to hurt to be effective. It needs to be consistent, intentional and humane. When you remove punishment and harsh self-talk from the process, discipline becomes something you can return to again and again without resistance. It becomes a steady presence rather than a forceful demand. By practicing discipline gently, you build a system that supports progress without sacrificing well-being. You move forward without tearing yourself down. And in that balance, discipline stops being something you endure and becomes something you can rely on.
Chapter 7. Face discomfort early, so growth feels less threatening. Discomfort is not the enemy of growth, but the doorway to it. What makes growth feel threatening is not discomfort itself, but how long it is avoided. When discomfort is postponed, it accumulates, it grows larger in the imagination, heavier in anticipation, and more intimidating with time. Facing discomfort early keeps it small, manageable and familiar. It prevents fear from inflating ordinary challenges into overwhelming obstacles. Most people do not fear growth because they are incapable. They fear it because they associate it with pain, embarrassment, or loss of control. These associations are often formed by waiting too long to act. When something feels uncomfortable, avoidance offers short-term relief. That relief teaches the brain that discomfort is dangerous. Each delay reinforces the belief that the feeling must be escaped. Over time, growth begins to feel like a threat rather than an opportunity. Facing discomfort early interrupts this pattern. When you step into mild discomfort before it intensifies, you teach your nervous system a different lesson. You show it that discomfort can be survived, managed, and even useful. This exposure reduces fear. The mind stops sounding alarms as quickly, because it has evidence that nothing catastrophic happens when discomfort is faced, rather than avoided. Early discomfort is often subtle. It shows up as hesitation, self-doubt, awkwardness, or a desire to delay. These signals are easy to ignore or rationalize away, yet these small moments are the most effective entry points for growth. Acting at this stage requires less emotional energy than waiting until the situation becomes urgent or unavoidable. The earlier you respond, the less resistance you encounter. When discomfort is faced early, it remains informational instead of emotional. You can learn from it rather than react to it. Waiting too long turns discomfort into anxiety. Anxiety narrows thinking and limits options. Early engagement keeps the experience within a range where curiosity is still possible. You can ask questions, experiment and adjust, without feeling overwhelmed. Facing discomfort early also builds trust with yourself. Each time you move towards something uncomfortable instead of away from it, you reinforce the belief that you can handle challenge. This belief reduces future fear. Growth begins to feel less like a leap and more like a step. You stop bracing yourself for impact and start approaching change with steadiness. Another benefit of early discomfort is desensitization. Repeated exposure to mild discomfort trains the nervous system to stay regulated. What once felt threatening begins to feel familiar. Familiarity does not eliminate discomfort, but it removes its power to paralyze. You learn that discomfort is temporary and proportional, not endless or overwhelming. Avoidance has a hidden cost. When discomfort is postponed, it rarely disappears. Instead, it shows up later in more intense form. A difficult conversation becomes a conflict. A neglected task becomes a crisis. A postponed decision becomes regret. Facing discomfort early prevents escalation. It keeps problems small and solutions accessible. There is also clarity that comes from early engagement. When you step into discomfort promptly, you gather information sooner. You learn what the challenge actually requires instead of guessing. This reduces uncertainty, which is often more distressing than the discomfort itself. Uncertainty feeds fear. Action reduces it. Facing discomfort early does not mean forcing yourself into extreme situations. It means responding honestly when something feels slightly uncomfortable but meaningful. It is about saying the thing you want to avoid saying, starting the task you keep postponing, or making the choice you keep delaying. These actions are rarely dramatic. They are simple, direct, and often quiet.
This practice also changes your relationship with fear. Fear becomes a signal rather than a stop sign. You begin to see it as an indicator of potential growth, rather than danger. This reframe shifts behavior. Instead of asking how to avoid fear, you ask how to move through it responsibly. Fear loses its authority when it is no longer obeyed automatically. Facing discomfort early also preserves emotional energy. Prolonged avoidance consumes mental resources. Worry, rumination, and anticipation drain far more energy than action. Early action frees that energy. You may feel discomfort briefly, but you avoid the prolonged stress of delay. This makes growth more efficient and less emotionally exhausting. As you build this habit, growth begins to feel less threatening, because it becomes predictable. You know what to expect. You expect some discomfort, but you also expect to survive it. This expectation reduces resistance. Growth stops feeling like a personal trial and starts feeling like a process you understand. Another important aspect is self-respect. Avoidance often leads to disappointment in yourself. You may feel frustrated for not acting sooner. Facing discomfort early protects this relationship. You align behavior with intention. Even if the outcome is imperfect, you know you acted honestly. This integrity matters more than success. Early discomfort also builds momentum. Small acts of courage compound. Each time you step toward discomfort, the next step feels less daunting. Momentum shifts the focus from fear to progress. You become engaged rather than frozen. Engagement reduces threat perception because you are no longer passive. There is also freedom in realizing that discomfort does not define the entire experience. When you face it early, you discover that it often fades faster than expected. The mind tends to exaggerate how long discomfort will last. Early exposure corrects this distortion. You learn that most discomfort peaks quickly and then declines once you are in motion. Facing discomfort early strengthens adaptability. You become better at adjusting in real time instead of reacting under pressure. This adaptability is essential for growth, because growth rarely follows a straight line. Early engagement allows for course correction before stakes become high. This practice also supports emotional resilience. Resilience is not built by avoiding difficulty, but by navigating it repeatedly in manageable doses. Facing discomfort early provides those doses. You stretch without tearing. Over time, your tolerance increases naturally. It is important to note that facing discomfort early does not mean ignoring your limits. There is a difference between healthy discomfort and harmful strain. The goal is not to overwhelm yourself, but to avoid unnecessary delay. Listening to your capacity while still choosing movement creates balance. As this habit develops, growth feels less threatening because it feels familiar. You recognize the sensations that come with change and no longer interpret them as signs of danger. Growth becomes something you participate in rather than something that happens to you. Ultimately, facing discomfort early is an act of self-leadership. You choose engagement over avoidance, clarity over delay, and courage over comfort. This choice reshapes how growth feels. It stops being a looming threat and becomes a series of manageable steps. By meeting discomfort early, you reduce its intensity, shorten its duration, and transform its meaning. Growth becomes less about enduring fear and more about expanding capability. You stop waiting for discomfort to force you to change and start choosing growth on your own terms. In doing so, you build a life where challenge is expected, respected, and no longer feared.
Chapter 8. Reduce excuses by accepting full ownership of outcomes. Excuses thrive where ownership is unclear. When responsibility feels shared, blurred, or optional, the mind looks for ways to protect comfort and avoid discomfort. Excuses are not always lies. They are often partial truths arranged to remove personal accountability. Accepting full ownership of outcomes does not mean blaming yourself for everything that happens. It means recognizing where your influence begins and ends, and refusing to hide from the part that belongs to you. This shift alone dismantles most excuses at their root. Many people resist full ownership because they confuse it with self-blame. Ownership is not punishment, it is clarity. Blame focuses on fault, while ownership focuses on agency. When you take ownership, you are not saying everything is your fault. You are saying that your actions, choices, and responses matter. This recognition is empowering, not burdensome. It places you back in the position of someone who can adjust, learn, and act. Excuses often emerge automatically when outcomes disappoint us. The mind scans for external reasons, timing, circumstances, other people, lack of resources, bad luck. Some of these factors may be real, but they become excuses when they are used to avoid examining personal contribution. Ownership asks a different question. Instead of asking why things went wrong, it asks what you can do differently next time. That question keeps attention on forward movement rather than defensive justification. When you accept full ownership, excuses lose their emotional function. Excuses exist to protect self-image and reduce discomfort. Ownership removes the need for that protection because it reframes mistakes as feedback. There is nothing to defend when learning is the goal. This mindset shift reduces internal resistance. You stop spending energy explaining and start spending it improving. Ownership also simplifies decision-making. When responsibility is fragmented, decisions feel heavy because outcomes feel uncertain and uncontrollable. When you accept ownership, you focus on what you can influence. This narrows the field of concern and increases clarity. You stop waiting for conditions to change and start adjusting behavior within current conditions. Taking ownership requires honesty. You must be willing to look at your choices without distortion. This honesty is uncomfortable at first because it removes familiar escape routes. However, discomfort fades as ownership becomes habitual. What replaces it is confidence. You trust yourself more because you know you will face reality rather than avoid it. This trust reduces anxiety about outcomes because you are no longer pretending you are powerless. Ownership also changes how you relate to failure. Without ownership, failure feels humiliating and threatening. With ownership, failure becomes instructive. You ask what the outcome is teaching you instead of what it says about you. This approach encourages experimenting and persistence. You are more willing to try again because failure no longer attacks your identity. Reducing excuses also improves consistency. Excuses interrupt momentum. Each excuse creates a pause, a justification for stopping or delaying. Ownership eliminates these pauses. You may still encounter obstacles, but you respond to them rather than explaining them away. This responsiveness keeps progress moving, even when conditions are imperfect. There is also a moral clarity that comes with ownership. You stop negotiating internally about whether you should act. The question shifts from "Can I justify not doing this?" to "What is my responsibility here?" This question is harder to evade and easier to act on. Over time, this clarity becomes a habit. You default to action rather than explanation. Ownership does not mean controlling outcomes. Many outcomes depend on factors beyond your reach. Ownership means controlling your effort, preparation, response, and follow-through. When you focus on these elements, outcomes become less emotionally charged. You care about results, but you are not defined by them. This balance reduces pressure and increases resilience. Excuses also often protect comfort. Ownership challenges comfort by demanding engagement. This can feel threatening initially, but it ultimately creates freedom. Comfort based on avoidance is fragile.
Freedom based on agency is stable. When you accept ownership, you are no longer dependent on circumstances aligning perfectly. You adapt instead of waiting. Ownership also strengthens self-respect. Each time you refuse to make an excuse and instead take responsibility, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of handling reality. This belief compounds. You begin to see yourself as someone who does not hide when things are difficult. This identity is deeply grounding and motivating. Another important aspect of ownership is language. Saying "I had no choice" often masks avoidance. In most situations, there are choices even if none are ideal. Reframing language to acknowledge choice restores agency. Saying "I chose this option" may feel uncomfortable, but it is honest. Honesty is the foundation of ownership. Ownership also improves learning speed. When excuses dominate, learning slows because mistakes are not fully examined. Ownership accelerates learning because it demands reflection. You identify patterns, adjust strategies, and refine effort. Progress becomes intentional rather than accidental. Accepting full ownership also changes how you handle success. You acknowledge your contribution rather than attributing success solely to luck or external help. This balanced view prevents both arrogance and self-doubt. You recognize effort without denying support. This realism strengthens confidence. There is also emotional relief in ownership. Making excuses requires mental gymnastics. You must remember the story, defend it, and repeat it. Ownership requires no such effort. You state what happened, acknowledge your role, and move forward. This simplicity reduces mental load and emotional tension. Ownership encourages proactive behavior. When you know you are responsible for outcomes, you prepare more carefully. You anticipate challenges and plan responses. This preparation reduces the need for excuses later. You are less surprised by difficulty because you expected it. As ownership becomes a habit, excuses feel less tempting. They lose their appeal because they no longer serve you. You see clearly that excuses delay growth and erode trust. Ownership, while uncomfortable at times, consistently produces better results. This practice also improves relationships. When you take ownership, conflicts are resolved more quickly. You focus on contribution rather than blame. This approach invites collaboration rather than defensiveness. It builds credibility and respect. Accepting full ownership does not mean ignoring context. It means acknowledging context without using it as a shield. You can recognize limitations while still asking what is possible within them. This balanced perspective keeps you grounded and effective. Ultimately, reducing excuses by accepting full ownership is a declaration of agency. You choose to stand in your influence rather than retreat into explanation. This choice transforms how you approach challenges. You stop asking who or what is responsible and start asking what you can do next. Ownership turns life into a series of solvable problems rather than a collection of unfair circumstances. It does not guarantee success, but it guarantees growth. By accepting full ownership of outcomes, you remove the need for excuses and replace them with action. In that replacement, progress becomes inevitable, not because conditions are perfect, but because responsibility is clear and consistently honored. Chapter 9. Strengthen identity through daily actions you respect. Identity is not something you decide once and carry forever. It is something you reinforce daily through the actions you choose and the standards you uphold. Who you believe yourself to be is shaped less by what you claim and more by what you repeatedly do. Each action sends a signal inward. Some signals build respect. Others quietly erode it. Strengthening identity is not about creating a dramatic new version of yourself, but about aligning daily behavior with actions you genuinely respect. Many people struggle with identity because they try to change it through thought alone. They repeat affirmations, imagine future success, or wait to feel different. But identity does not shift through imagination. It shifts through evidence. The mind updates its self-image based on observable behavior. When you act in ways you admire, even in small ways, your sense of self begins to change naturally. Respect follows action, not intention. Daily actions matter because identity is reinforced in ordinary moments, not exceptional ones. Grand achievements are rare. Small choices are constant. Whether you follow through, speak honestly, take responsibility, or avoid what matters most, all contribute to how you see yourself. These moments may seem insignificant, but they accumulate. Over time, they form a pattern. That pattern becomes identity. Respect is the key filter. Not all actions strengthen identity. Only actions you respect do. This respect is personal, not performative. It does not come from external approval. It comes from an internal sense of alignment. When you act in a way that matches your values, even imperfectly, something inside settles. When you act against them, something inside resists. Learning to listen to this response helps you choose actions that build identity rather than dilute it. Strengthening identity does not require constant success. It requires consistency in effort and integrity. You may fail, struggle, or move slowly. Those experiences do not weaken identity if your actions remain honest. What damages identity is avoidance, self-betrayal, and repeated disregard for your own standards. Identity grows stronger when you know you will show up in ways you can stand behind, even when outcomes are uncertain. Daily actions you respect often feel simple, not dramatic. They might include starting something you said you would start, stopping something you know is unhelpful, or telling the truth when it would be easier to hide. These actions rarely attract attention, but they shape self-perception deeply. You begin to see yourself as someone who acts with intention rather than impulse. There is also stability in building identity this way. When identity is tied to external success, it fluctuates. Good days inflate it, bad days collapse it. When identity is tied to behavior you respect, it remains steadier. You can have an unproductive day and still maintain self-respect if your actions were aligned with effort and honesty. This stability reduces anxiety and self-strengthening. Identity through daily action also changes how you respond to challenges. When you see yourself as someone who acts with integrity, challenges become tests of behavior rather than threats to worth. You focus on how you respond rather than how you appear. This perspective reduces defensiveness and increases resilience. Another important aspect is narrowing the gap between who you are and who you believe you should be. Large gaps create shame and frustration. Small, daily actions close that gap gradually. Each action you respect reduces internal conflict. You stop feeling like you are pretending or falling short of your own expectations. This alignment creates a quiet confidence that does not require validation. Daily respected actions also build momentum. Once you experience the internal reward of self-respect, you want more of it. This motivation is different from external pressure. It is self-reinforcing. You act not to prove something to others, but to maintain alignment with yourself. This makes consistency easier over time. Identity is also shaped by what you tolerate. Allowing patterns you secretly disapprove of weakens self-trust. Choosing actions you respect often requires setting boundaries, both internally and externally. You may need to stop excusing behavior that undermines your value. This clarity strengthens identity by signaling that your standards matter. It is important to be realistic in this process. Identity does not require perfection. Expecting flawless behavior leads to discouragement. Respect grows from honest effort, not from never making mistakes. When you recover thoughtfully after setbacks, identity strengthens rather than weakens. Recovery itself becomes an action you respect. Another benefit of this approach is reduced comparison. When identity is built internally, comparison loses relevance. You measure yourself against your own standards instead of others' achievements. This shift frees mental energy and reduces insecurity. You focus on becoming consistent rather than impressive. Daily respected actions also influence long-term direction. Identity shapes choices, and choices shape life. When your identity is rooted in behaviors you admire, decisions become easier. You naturally choose paths that align with who you are becoming. This alignment reduces inner conflict and indecision. As identity strengthens, self-talk changes. You speak to yourself with more respect because your actions support that tone. You are less likely to engage in harsh criticism when behavior consistently reflects effort and integrity. This creates a healthier internal environment that supports further growth. Strengthening identity through daily action also creates durability. External circumstances change. Motivation fluctuates. Confidence wavers. Identity built on respected behavior endures. It is grounded in what you do, not how you feel. This durability provides stability during uncertainty and stress. Over time, you may notice that you no longer need to convince yourself of who you are. You know because you have lived it. This knowing is calm, not boastful. It does not seek recognition. It simply exists as internal certainty. This process also encourages patience. Identity does not transform overnight. It evolves through repetition. Each day offers an opportunity to reinforce it. Missed days do not erase progress if you return to action with honesty. What matters is the overall pattern, not isolated moments. Ultimately, strengthening identity through daily actions you respect is about self-alignment. It is about becoming someone you trust. Not because you are perfect, but because you are consistent in your values. This trust changes how you approach life. You stop chasing confidence and start living in a way that generates it naturally. When daily actions reflect who you want to be, identity stops feeling fragile. It becomes something you carry quietly, reinforced by behavior rather than words. In that quiet reinforcement, self-respect grows. Decisions simplify, and direction becomes clearer. You are no longer trying to become someone else. You are becoming more fully yourself, one respected action at a time. Chapter 10. Lead yourself consistently, and success will follow naturally. Leading yourself consistently is not a dramatic act reserved for moments of inspiration or crisis. It is a quiet, ongoing practice that shapes outcomes over time. Self-leadership does not announce itself. It reveals itself through patterns, how you decide, how you follow through, how you respond when things do not go as planned. When you lead yourself well, success becomes a byproduct rather than a chase. It follows naturally because your behavior aligns with direction, effort, and integrity. Many people think of leadership as something external, something exercised over others. Yet the most influential form of leadership happens internally. If you cannot guide your own actions, moods, and choices, external success remains unstable. Self-leadership begins with clarity. You know what matters to you, not perfectly, but enough to guide daily decisions. This clarity does not require certainty about the future. It requires commitment to acting in ways that support growth rather than comfort alone. Consistency is the defining feature of effective self-leadership. Occasional effort produces occasional results. Consistent effort produces predictable progress. Consistency does not mean doing the same thing mechanically every day. It means showing up repeatedly with intention, even when conditions change. This reliability builds momentum. Momentum reduces friction. Over time, forward movement feels less forced and more natural. Leading yourself consistently requires making decisions that your future self will respect. This does not mean sacrificing all pleasure or rest. It means choosing balance deliberately rather than reactively. You do not wait for pressure to force discipline. You initiate it gently and steadily. This proactive stance changes your relationship with time. Instead of rushing to fix problems later, you address them earlier when they are manageable. Self-leadership also involves direction. Without direction, consistency turns into busy repetition. Direction gives meaning to effort. You do not need a perfect plan, but you need a general sense of where you are heading. This sense of direction acts as a compass. When distractions appear, you can evaluate them against your direction rather than your mood. This reduces impulsive detours that slow progress. Another essential aspect of self-leadership is self-regulation. Emotions fluctuate, energy rises and falls. External circumstances shift unexpectedly. Leading yourself means adjusting without abandoning your values. You may slow down, change approach, or reassess priorities, but you do not disappear from your commitments. This adaptability keeps progress alive during decant periods. Self-leadership also means holding yourself accountable without hostility. You notice when you drift. You correct course without drama. This calm accountability preserves energy and focus. Harsh reactions to mistakes create resistance. Measured responses encourage learning. Over time, this approach builds trust within yourself. You know you will respond constructively rather than destructively when things go wrong. Consistency in self-leadership creates internal stability. You stop feeling pulled in multiple directions because your actions follow a coherent pattern. This stability reduces anxiety and indecision. When choices arise, you can ask whether they align with how you lead yourself. This question simplifies decisions and prevents unnecessary conflict. Success often feels elusive because people focus on outcomes instead of systems. Self-leadership is a system. It governs how you show up regardless of immediate results. When the system is solid, outcomes improve naturally. You may not notice progress daily, but it accumulates. Over time, what once felt like effort becomes routine. What once felt difficult becomes familiar. Leading yourself also changes how you experience setbacks. Instead of seeing them as signs of failure, you see them as part of the process. You adjust without abandoning the path. This resilience prevents small setbacks from becoming permanent stops. Consistent self-leadership keeps you engaged, even when progress slows. There is also humility in self-leadership. You accept that growth takes time. You resist the urge to force outcomes prematurely. This patience protects you from burnout and disappointment. You focus on what you can do today rather than what you wish were already done. This grounded approach keeps you present and effective. Self-leadership strengthens confidence quietly. Confidence does not come from constant success. It comes from knowing you will show up regardless of circumstances. This knowledge is calming. It removes the pressure to feel confident before acting. Action becomes the source of confidence, not the result of it. Leading yourself consistently also clarifies priority. When you act with intention repeatedly, you begin to see what truly matters. Distractions lose appeal because they do not fit the pattern you are building. You become selective with your energy. This selectivity increases effectiveness and reduces overwhelm. As self-leadership deepens, success feels less dramatic and more earned. It arrives through alignment rather than force.
You are not chasing it anxiously. You are creating the conditions for it through daily behavior. This approach reduces stress because you are focused on process rather than prediction. Another benefit of self-leadership is integrity. Integrity is not about being flawless. It is about being aligned. When your actions match your values consistently, self-respect grows. This self-respect influences how you carry yourself, how you communicate.